You know, sometimes I have to step back and realize what a lucky guy I am. I get to do what I love and have all these wonderful toys here. So over there we got that Champ that's in progress, waiting for its new speaker. And here we've got that 67 Super Reverb waiting for some new preamp tubes. But here we have a 64 Fender Twin Reverb. And this thing is in near mint shape, aside from the aging of the grill cloth and a couple little minor dings in the pine cabinet. I mean, this thing is just beautiful. And the owner says, no sound. So let's put this on the bench and see what's going on. All right, I pulled the chassis and I tried not to look inside, so I kind of see things at the same time that you see things. But I did notice that the power cable had been changed out for a grounded one. So I know some work has been done on this amp. It is not all stock. What I did see on the inside, without meaning to, leads me to think that it's mostly stock. But let's get into this. So the date codes on the power, choke, and output transformers are all for 1963. You got 606, which is the EIA code for Schumacher, and then the next number is a 3. So 63 on those transformers. Got a later replacement on the reverb transformer. No big deal. It has RCA short bottle 6L6s. I don't think that they're original to the amp, given that they have a number and then a date. So they're all dated to 2020. And this one is 11, 6, 7, and 11, which makes me think that someone rated these on a tube tester and then made a matched quad with them. So you have 11 and 6 for 17 on this side, and 7 and 10 here for 17 on this side. Now that's not a perfectly matched quad, in which case, you know, you'd want each tube in the quad to be pulling the exact same. But this is probably fine. We'll find out because if this pair is drawing the same amount of current as this pair, the amp itself will be happy as long as no individual tube is drawing too much or too little within that pair. We'll find out. Let's not borrow trouble. Here in 64, and I think it lasted through 65, maybe early 66, there was a nickel plating on the steel chassis, and these are just lovely. You know, some places they're brand new. On the inside, it looked like it was all pretty much new. On the outside, it gets this kind of coppery patina. And the doghouse is really in good shape. Let's take a look inside. I removed the screws already, so it didn't have that zzz, zzz noise from the power screwdriver, but we'll look inside together. All right, someone recapped this with atoms. I put the 4 screws in the doghouse cover before I forget. Don't want to flip the chassis over and have those go flying. Put that to the side. All right, so it's got the original dropping resistors there. It means it probably has the original voltage balance resistors across the series caps. Speaking of which, well, no, this doesn't have series caps. This has got these caps in parallel, looks like. Let me triple check that, because I would not expect to find 20 microfarad caps in a twin. Well, holy cow. I looked at the tube chart inside the cabinet, and this is a really rare amp. It's an AA763. I have never seen one, and I did a quick search for the schematic, and Google, every time I type in AA763 twin, thinks I either mistyped AB763 or I meant an AA763 Vibrolux, which is a very different amp. So I will contact my friend Nick Grabian. I think that's how he pronounces his name, or Graben, you know, online friend. So I've never actually spoken to him or pronounced his name or heard it pronounced, but I think it's Nick Grabian. Great guy. We've spoken a lot virtually over the years. And he is a Fender historian, and he will know more on this. But I was expecting to see series filter capacitors here, like on the AB763, which would have the balance resistors down there. This one does not. This has two 20 microfarads in parallel, which means that this amp can only have 500 volts on this first node. And that's a bit concerning. I'll have to see what the B plus is on this. This does not have a tube rectifier, of course. That may be a lot for those caps to handle. We shall see. So this will be interesting to see what other differences there are between this very, very early AA763 and this AB763, which is what, 98, 99% of all twins from the black panel era are. So this is very cool. I must remember not to drop it. Let's take a look at the other side. Let's do a slow tour through this, and I'll point things out as I see them. Number one, you can see the added ground for the AC safety ground connection on the power cord, and it was made to transformer bolt, which is not my favorite. I'll do a chassis connection for that, just like all the original chassis connections. So they were done in different places on this earlier amp than they were on later ones. So in the bias, they have changed out the cap. They use 100 microfarad, 100 volt. It's a popular choice. When this was recapped, let's say 2013 or a little bit later, you could still get these excellent Nichicon axial caps. About 2-3 years ago, Nichicon stopped making the axials, so that's no longer an option. It has all the original diodes in there. Sometimes those are funky. Remember, the problem this amp came in for is no sound. So we'll be looking at that. Now down here, they installed a grounded power cable and removed the death cap and the ground switch, but they did not do it to modern code. So they're fusing the neutral and switching the hot. I will change that to modern safety code. It has the original screen grid resistors, which are very likely to be kind of toasty, but they look pretty good in this amp. This amp may not have been played as much as others, given the overall condition of it and how clean it is. I think this was babied. I don't think this went honky-tonkin' for much of its life. Quick view down the preamp tubes. Everything there looks pretty much stock. I'll do a closer examination of each one of the solder joints on the tubes. Let's start over here with the jacks. So there was a liquid spill at some point which ran through the input jacks, down these resistors, and to the chassis. That's no big deal. I'll clean that up. Just panning across all original pots, as far as I can see, and input jacks. And I'll be triple checking each one of these wires that goes from the cathodes on the board to this brass panel. And I'll make sure that all the hardware is tight. But so far as this tube sockets and pots and jacks go, everything looks original. So look at the main board here. All right, you've got an added 120 microfarad cap there, which would not be on the original, I don't think. I'll measure the resistors throughout to make sure that a resistor just hasn't failed, though I'm not seeing anything toasty. These solder joints have been touched up when this cap was added. This is not original. And this 1 nanofarad film cap is not original, but perhaps the original ceramic disc cap there went microphonic. All the cathode bypass caps have been replaced with these Nichicon 22 microfarad 100 volts, which is fine. It's not my preference here as far as the speed pot responding to changes and tracking with the actual vibrato changes, but that's not a fault. That's probably what was in here originally on this very early twin. Get this wire off that resistor lead. Just because if it's against that lead, and that's a B+ node, you only have the cloth of this insulating from that. Whereas this way, it's across the resistor body. And there's no direct path if that cloth should have a humidity swing. Got a replaced 10 nanofarad disc cap here, and they went with a 15 nanofarad cap, which will slightly slow down the twin. I don't know if that was deliberate or whether that was the cap that they had. I don't think that the cathode bypass caps were installed as neatly as I would like, particularly in a twin from '64 with this very early model. Replace the ceramic disc in the reverb driver, replace the ceramic disc 22 here, or 20 nanofarad here. And while the Mallory 150M is a fine choice, I don't think it was installed particularly well, number one. Number two, there is a certain sound that those ceramic discs give, the class 2 ceramic discs, here, and to a degree here, and to a large degree here, but crucially this one, that really influenced the sound of the black panel reverb Fender era. And so if you put in a film cap, on paper it's great, but every little change you make like that gets you farther from the sound. Other than the solder work on the cathodes and the little bit of excess flux that they left, which I don't like, I would get all that up if this were my work, and I'll probably get a bunch of it up regardless, just because that can become conductive. Anyway, I'll look at that later. You know, I don't see any big flaws here. I got a replace 250 picofarad cap here and the treble control with a good quality silver mica. And again, there's something about the sound of the old class 2 ceramics, but I'm not seeing anything there that should cause loss of signal. And given the capacitors and the amp seem to be safe and new enough, I think it's time to power this up and see what it sounds like. Now, I am going to first power this up connected to my cabinet. Actually, no, I'm not. Normally, I was going to say I have my test cab, which is 8 ohms, and I just do a dummy load in parallel with it for 4 ohms. But I just remembered I have a 70s twin cabinet here. That will be a fine 4 ohm load for testing, just in case the original speakers, the old Jensens from '64, I think they're original, we'll look at that later, are bad, because that could be the loss of sound. And if that's the case, I don't want to run this amp, this very rare Fender, without a load. Now, the fuse holder looks non-original, and it is loose. So I'm going to tighten that up, and then we're going to verify what fuse is in here and see where we're at. Well, I'm going to have to replace that fuse holder because whoever installed this cross-threaded it, and the metal has just chewed up the plastic, and it cannot be tightened. But for right now, it's safe enough to power things up on. I'm going to make sure that fuse hasn't just blown. All right. Further making me think that this amp was not played very loud or very often. It had a 2 amp fuse in it, and the proper amp is a 2.5. If this thing had been cranked and pushed, it would have blown that fuse. That's not the case. So came in, reported no sound. The volume on the reverb channel was at 10. So I assume that's the channel they tested. So I'm going to be checking the volume on the normal channel. But first, I want to make sure that the B+ is not too high with modern wall voltages, which is 120 from the wall right now. I've got a current limiter in place right now, which will lower that a little bit. And I'll make sure there are no shorts first, and then we'll see what it is without the current limiter. So when the amp's powered on, but in standby, the unloaded B plus, 458. Okay, so we're good there. Let's take it out of standby. And just I'll give it a little bit more of a warm up. That's a huge drop. See that 360? That's artificially low, but there's no short condition. So I'm going to turn off the current limiter now. And we're going to repeat that with a full 120 volts coming from the wall. So right now, with the amp off in standby, we've got about 8 volts there. It's going down a bit. Let's start again. Without the wall voltage drop from the limiter, the unloaded B plus is 478-ish. So about a 25 volt difference. And then out of standby. All right, 450, that's good. So we don't have to worry about the parallel caps on the first stage. I'll triple check the bias and all that in a little bit. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that the plates and screens on each output tube are the same. The screens are the same as each other, and the plates are the same as each other. Not that the plates and screens are the same. So 442, 443, 443, 443. That's on the plates. Now we check all the screens. 443, 443. 443, 443. So at least before a bunch of current has flowed, we do have good screen grids. And I did hear it through the speaker as I measured that, so the output transformer is working. Hopefully it's working well, but I know it's at least making sound. So let's see if the normal channel works. This may just be a bad preamp tube. All right, I don't think they've used this channel a long time. Needs some cleanup. The effect of that bright cap is less than I would expect, but it is making a change. So we have sound on the normal channel. Let's go to the reverb channel. All right, the reverb is disconnected, but it's adding noise as I would expect. So we have some pots that need cleaning. And let's make sure the tremolo is working. Vibrato, as Leo called it. It's always funny to me that he got vibrato and tremolo backwards on a Strat versus an amp. Anyway. Not as deep as on some, but it's working. That can just be the strength of the tube. So, the owner reported no sound. And As you can hear, there is sound. So let's go check out the speakers in that cab. Remember, I didn't want to hook up this amp to those speakers in case that was the problem. There was no load and it damaged the amp. At this point, that's what we need to investigate. Now, I don't know whether these speakers are original to the amp because I am not a vintage speaker expert, but they look likely. At least the one on the left does, and the one on the right looks much the same. So it doesn't have the stickers, but maybe the sticker came off. Maybe there's a transition period. You can tell I use these magnets to hold the hardware in combos while I'm not working on them. The first thing I'm going to do is just going to measure the impedance of the two speakers together, which should be about 4 ohms. And I'm getting 15 meg. All right, that does not bode well. So let me measure each speaker at the terminals. It's possible that the speakers are fine and there's a break in the wire. Overload on this one, so no connection. There's no connection on that one. And that would be really strange for both to fail at the same time, unless something really bad happened. Quick and dirty speaker test. 9-volt battery. Nothing. Let me confirm the voltage on the battery, just in case I picked up a dead one. 5 volts, I should have heard something. So I think we have 2 dead speakers here. And probably well worth having them reconed. There's a guy in town, Dave Halford, who does fantastic recone work. So, I think I know what we need to do now. All right, I'm going to share this video with the owner, and I'm going to make the following recommendations. Well, I am making these recommendations, but I'll also do it over the phone. Given that this is an exceedingly rare amp, I would like to replace some of these films with proper Class 2 ceramics where they used to be. And put a 10 in here so the tremolo is exactly stock. I might even have some old 10 nanofarad discs from Poles. And it is up to the owner whether he has me replace these screen grid resistors before they fail, though they seem okay. The one thing I would urge him to let me do, and it's his choice, collector's value versus protecting the amp itself. I have seen diodes from 60s Fenders fail, and I would hate to lose anything in this very valuable, beautiful twin because of an old diode, which was a cheap part in 1964, 63, and is still a cheap part. And so I would like to replace these diodes and this carbon comp here, and I'd replace this cap at the same time, and move this ground connection to chassis and redo the wiring on the AC cable to modern safety codes. Remove this cap, which is not necessary, and then have all this as close to fully restored as possible with Class 2 ceramics, new ones. If the owner wants, I can track down some old ones from Fenders. It costs more. Depends on whether he wants something which is exactly what it was when it was new, or in which case we have to get replacements that are new old stock or pulls from amps, or that looks and sounds pretty much as what it would have been new, in which case I can use a brand new 1000-volt Class 2 ceramics for these positions. Or whether he's fine with it as is because it is working just fine. And if the sound's slightly different, the sound's slightly different. But, and I need to replace the fuse holder. That's a given. And order some 2.5 amp fuses. But the main issue that he has is his speakers are pining for the fjords. And I'm going to take them to my friend Dave Halford and have him look at them and confirm that they are original Jensens from this period, from 63, 64. And if they are, then I'll get his price and turnaround time for reconing them. And that would be the best solution, because those C12Ns, if that's what those are phenomenal speakers. And I have so much to learn and keep up with on the insides of amps that most of my speaker knowledge, I know more than most, but I am not a speaker expert, and I defer to Dave, and I consult with him for that kind of thing. I know the insides, he knows the speakers, and I got friends and clients who play the guitar better than I do, and together we're an unstoppable team. So let me call the owner with the good, bad news.